Your white blood cells manufacture hydrogen peroxide every single day to kill bacteria. Your body has been doing this since before you were born. And someone figured out they could bottle it, rename it 15 times, and charge you $500 a year to buy back what you already make. I first understood this standing in a kitchen in Holmes County, Ohio. One shelf, one bottle. A woman who raised 8 kids and never needed anything else. Tonight, I am going to show you exactly what she knew. You already own the formula. Holmes County, Ohio. Winter 2003. Gravel driveway. Wood smoke in the air before I even reached the door. I walked in expecting what every American house has. Cabinet under the sink, loaded with sprays, basket of cleaners by the washing machine, the full setup. What I found was one wooden shelf above the sink and one brown bottle sitting on it. I counted. That was it. I thought it was poverty. It was not poverty. It took me 3 days of watching before I understood what it actually was. Here is the number the average American household spends between $400 and $600 every year on cleaning and hygiene products. Multiply that over 30 years of home ownership. That is between $12,000 and $18,000 handed over bottle by bottle for what this one $3 bottle used to handle alone. Before this video ends, I am going to show you a technique from a 1,965 USDA bulletin. Printed once, on thin paper, distributed through county extension offices, never reprinted after the first run. I followed it exactly myself, and my $5 bag of strawberries was still fresh on day 12. Not approximately fresh, actually fresh. That document did not disappear. The knowledge inside it did not fail. It was allowed to fade quietly, deliberately, one new product launch at a time. And the people who never watched those product commercials, the ones in Holmes County and Lancaster County and Millersburg, they just kept using the bottle. Same formula, same shelf above the sink, same results their grandmothers got. Here is what it costs you to do the same. $3. Go to your kitchen right now, open the cabinet under the sink, and count every bottle in there. Not the number you think is there, the actual number. Most people guess 7 or 8. The real number is usually between 12 and 19. Specialty tile spray, grout whitener, cutting board sanitizer, stainless steel polish, drain freshener, dish soap in 3 varieties. The collection under the average American sink looks like a small pharmacy. Now open your bathroom cabinet. Do the same count. Before we go any further, I want you to do one calculation. Take the total number of bottles you just counted, multiply by $8. That is the average price point for household cleaning and hygiene products in the United States. That number is roughly what you spend every time that cabinet needs restocking. Most households restock about 3 times a year. So take your number, multiply by $8, multiply by 3. That is your annual cleaning spend. For most households, it lands between $400 and $600. Multiply that by 25 years of home ownership. You are looking at between $10,000 and $15,000. There is a second number almost nobody calculates. Every week, the average American household throws out between $30 and $40 in produce that went bad before it got used. Strawberries fuzzy on day 4. Lettuce slimy before the week ends. Tomatoes soft before you got around to them. Over 10 years, that is between $15, $620, 800 inches food you already paid for, going into a trash bag. Those two numbers together represent somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 over the course of a typical home ownership. So here is the question I want you to sit with. Who decided you needed a different bottle for every room? Who decided the woman who ran a household in 1942 with one shelf of supplies now needs a color-coded system just to keep her kitchen sanitary? You are not a homeowner in this system. You are a subscription. The answer to that question did not start in a boardroom. It started with a decision made quietly over decades to let certain knowledge fade and to fill the space it left with something that needed to be replaced every month. That knowledge did not disappear on its own. But before I tell you who helped it along, let me show you how old this actually is and who never stopped using it. The earliest systematic use of hydrogen peroxide in American medicine dates to the 1910s and 1920s. Not hospitals, farm clinics. Doctors in rural Ohio, Indiana, and Pennsylvania were treating the kinds of injuries that do not make medical history. Barbed wire cuts that had been open for 2 days before the farmer made it to town. Machinery wounds full of grease and debris. Infected animal bites in the middle of winter. They needed something cheap, reliable, and effective that worked without refrigeration in a clinic that might not see a supply delivery for 2 weeks. Hydrogen peroxide was that thing. One treatment on a fresh wound. The oxygen lifted contamination. The wound healed clean. The protocol was simple: water first, peroxide once, then stop. That medical tradition and the Amish tradition share the same underlying logic: use the right thing at the right moment, then leave it alone. I did not understand that distinction until I stood in a farmhouse kitchen in Holmes County, Ohio, in the winter of 2003 and watched a woman do something so simple I almost missed it. I am going to be honest about something. When I drove out there that first time, I was not expecting to find anything useful. I was writing about rural self-sufficiency, and I needed atmosphere. I thought I would get a good scene and drive back to Columbus by evening. I stayed 3 days. The kitchen was warm when I walked in, wood stove going, even in early December, that particular dry heat that old farmhouses hold differently than anything with central heating. There was a smell I could not identify at first. Not bleach, not any chemical I recognized, something clean underneath the wood smoke. The woman I watched, I will call her Ruth because I never asked her real name, and I have regretted that ever since, had a ceramic basin sitting by the back door. Not decorative. Working. She filled it with cold water from the tap, measured something from the brown bottle on the shelf, set her morning harvest in it, and went back to other tasks without a word. I waited for the complicated part. It never came. Later I asked her how long she soaked things. She said her mother had told her 5 minutes, minimum 10 for produce that had been sitting a while. I asked where her mother learned it. She looked at me the way you look at someone who has asked whether the sky is usually blue. She said her mother learned it from her mother. That chain reaches back at least to the early 1900s. The Amish were not learning this from government publications. They were carrying practical knowledge the way most knowledge traveled before television decided what was worth knowing. In the early 1960s, agricultural researchers at Cornell University and Ohio State University ran controlled seed germination trials. Seeds soaked in a dilute hydrogen peroxide solution, 1 teaspoon of 3% peroxide per cup of water a few hours before planting, germinated 2 to 3 days faster than untreated seeds. Germination rates were 20 to 30% higher. The mechanism, the peroxide, softens the seed coat and delivers oxygen directly to the embryo inside. The farmers in Lancaster County had been doing a version of the same thing for generations without knowing the terminology. They just knew their seedlings came up faster and stronger. In 2003, a peer-reviewed study published in the Journal of Food Protection confirmed that hydrogen peroxide solutions significantly reduced E. coli and salmonella contamination on produce surfaces. Published. Peer-reviewed. Available in any university library. Never printed on a bottle label. Not once. Ruth had cucumbers from September still in her cellar in November. I checked. Firm when you press them. Not preserved in any chemical way. Just rinsed in that basin and stored in the cool, dark room at the back of the house. I bought tomatoes at a grocery store that same week in Lancaster County. They lasted 6 days. The question that kept coming up in my notes after those visits was always the same. Why does it actually work? The answer is simpler than the industry needs you to think it is. Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2, water with 1 extra oxygen atom attached. That is the entire formula. When it contacts an enzyme called catalase found in bacteria, mold spores, and damaged tissue, that bond breaks instantly. Oxygen releases. You see white foam. That foam is not the chemical burning you. It is oxygen doing physical work, lifting bacteria and debris away from the surface, the way carbonation lifts sediment from the bottom of a glass. Mechanical cleaning, powered by chemistry. Here's the number: 3% hydrogen peroxide kills 99.9% of common household bacteria on contact. Standard antibacterial spray achieves roughly the same kill rate. The difference is what is left behind. Antibacterial sprays leave chemical residue. Peroxide breaks down into water and oxygen. Nothing else remains. Your body uses this exact mechanism every day. White blood cells produce hydrogen peroxide as a first-line weapon every time bacteria enter your bloodstream. You have been manufacturing this compound since before you were born. The American Dental Association has documented the antibacterial and whitening effects of dilute peroxide in oral care since the 1980s. A peer-reviewed dental study confirmed a measurable whitening after 6 weeks of daily use with a 1% peroxide preparation. The toothpaste industry packaged that same formula and charges $8 for a 2-ounce tube. The compound costs $3. The chemistry cannot be patented. The biology is not proprietary. Physics does not care what name is printed on the bottle. The chemistry is simple. So the question that matters is if this works, the research confirms it, and farmers in Lancaster County have known it for over 100 years. Why does that replacement aisle exist? Let me tell you what happened between 1960 and 1975. The household chemical market in the United States expanded by over 400% in 15 years. The U.S. population grew by approximately 20% in the same period. A 400% market expansion does not come from population growth. Something deliberate was driving it. Procter & Gamble, founded in Cincinnati in 1837 by William Procter and James Gamble, had already transformed the American laundry room once with synthetic detergent. Tide launched in 1946, Cascade dishwasher powder in 1955, Comet cleaning powder in 1956. Each product created a new behavior. You did not buy soap anymore. You bought a specific product for a specific room for a specific surface. By 1962, Procter & Gamble was the single largest advertiser in the United States, larger than General Motors, larger than Ford. Their total advertising spend that year exceeded $200 million, focused primarily on print and television campaigns in Good Housekeeping, Ladies' Home Journal, and McCall's. These were the exact publications that one generation earlier had run home economy columns about how to stretch one product across multiple tasks. Now, those same publications ran full-page advertisements telling American women that multi-purpose cleaning was dangerous. That word dangerous appeared consistently in cleaning product advertising copy throughout the 1960s, applied to methods that had been standard American household practice for 40 years. Women who used traditional single-product approaches were described in print as old-fashioned. In some campaigns, as women who did not care about their family's health, they sell you the problem and the solution in the same aisle. The same pattern repeated in every product category throughout the decade. Specialized tile cleaner, specialized grout whitener, specialized refrigerator deodorizer, specialized cutting board sanitizer, each one replacing what peroxide already did. The gardening product market ran the same playbook. Between 1960 and 1984, new product categories were commercially introduced for the home garden, fungicide, pesticide, germination booster, and root health supplement. The gardening household product industry grew from approximately $200 million in 1960 to over $1 billion by 1980. One dilute peroxide solution handled effectively what those four categories replaced. The 1965 USDA bulletin was printed once, distributed through county extension offices in Pennsylvania and Ohio, never reprinted after the initial run. The extension offices responsible for distributing it were receiving increasing grant funding from agricultural chemical companies throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s. That funding came with research priorities. The priorities did not include promoting techniques that eliminated the need for commercial products. I am not telling you that executives made a decision in a room to suppress that bulletin. I am telling you the bulletin was printed once, never updated, never reprinted, and the funding landscape of the institutions that distributed it changed materially in the years immediately following. The Amish did not receive those grants. They were not represented on those committees. They did not watch the commercials or read the advertisements. They kept the basin by the door and the bottle on the shelf and carried the knowledge forward from one set of hands to the next without anyone's permission. It was not buried because it failed. It was buried because it worked. You do not need to be angry to use what comes next. Anger is not the point. Knowing what to do tonight is the point. If you are thinking this only applies to people with farmhouses or large gardens, stop. The first application I am going to walk you through works in any apartment with a bathroom. The second works in any kitchen with a sink. What you need: 1 bottle of 3% hydrogen peroxide. Brown plastic, white label. Available at any drugstore or supermarket. Between $1.50 and $3. You probably already own one. That is the complete supply list. The bathroom. If your home was built between 1950 and 1975, your tile grout is almost certainly cement-based, porous. It absorbs moisture and feeds mold colonies from the inside out. Standard mold spray kills the surface, the roots survive in the grout, and the mold returns in 5 to 7 days. You buy another $9 bottle and repeat. Pour 3% peroxide into a spray bottle. Spray directly and heavily onto the grout lines. Let it sit for 10 full minutes without rinsing. You will see it foam in specific spots. Those are the active mold colonies below the surface. Scrub with an old toothbrush. Rinse with warm water. Do this once a month. I started this routine in my own bathroom. Original 1971 construction, cement grout, hard water from an older well system. I have not bought a specialty mold product in over 3 years. The refrigerator. If your refrigerator is more than 15 years old, the rubber door seal has small folds that collect food particles and grow bacteria steadily. You cannot clean rubber gaskets with bleach. Bleach dehydrates the rubber, the seal cracks, cold air escapes, and your electricity bill climbs. Soak a cloth in 3% peroxide. Wrap it around the gasket. Leave it 15 minutes. The bacteria die. The rubber stays intact. No chemical residue left near your food. Peroxide breaks down into water and oxygen, nothing more. The laundry. Houses built before 1980 frequently have galvanized steel pipes, releasing trace iron into the water. Iron and bleach react and create yellow staining on white fabric. You have seen this and probably assumed the shirt was ruined. It is not ruined. 1 cup of 3% peroxide in a hot water wash with your regular detergent whitens without triggering that iron reaction. It does not damage elastic, does not weaken cotton fiber over repeated washings, and is safe for older cast iron drain systems that bleach slowly corrodes. Now, the medicine cabinet. For surface wounds, shallow cuts, scrapes, dirty abrasions, rinse with plain water first. Water removes the bulk of contamination before the peroxide works. Then apply 3% peroxide directly to the wound. 30 seconds of foam. 1 application only. Then clean water and honey for everything after. This was the Amish protocol in Holmes County for at least 4 generations. Peroxide once on the first cleaning, then stop. I got that wrong myself the first time I used it seriously. I kept applying peroxide daily because I thought consistency meant better results. The wound healed slower than it should have. The one-time rule exists because repeat application disrupts new tissue growth. Once, then stop. For oral care, 1 part 3% peroxide, 1 part water. Swish for 30 seconds. Spit. Rinse with plain water. About 40 cents a month. For nail fungus, warm water basin with a generous pour of peroxide. Soak the affected foot for 10 minutes 4 times a week. Fungus is anaerobic. It cannot survive in a high oxygen environment. This was established microbiology by the 1930s. It takes weeks of consistency, not days. For earwax, not infection-only wax, tilt your head, drop a few drops of 3% peroxide into the ear canal, leave it 60 seconds. You will hear a soft fizzing. Tilt the other direction over a towel. The softened wax comes out. That is the entire process. No tool, no clinic visit, about 2 cents worth of peroxide. The cutting board. Wooden cutting boards harbor bacteria deep in the grain that dish soap and hot water cannot reach. Spray 3% peroxide on the board after each use. Let it foam for 60 seconds. Rinse with water. Dry standing upright. Standard kitchen practice in Holmes County farmhouses going back to the 1920s. The same protocol works on livestock. A surface wound on a calf or a goat, diluted peroxide, 1 cleaning, then stop. Farm veterinarians in Ohio and Pennsylvania were doing this themselves until the 1970s, before pharmaceutical sales representatives started showing up at auction barns with free samples of injectable antibiotics. That was a different kind of replacement story. Same pattern. The garden, I was not going to include this section because I thought it would feel too far from most people's daily lives. Then I remembered that 40 million American households have some kind of garden. 1 teaspoon of 3% peroxide per cup of water. Soak seeds for a few hours before planting. Cornell and Ohio State documented the result in the early 1960s. Germination 2 to 3 days faster, rates 20 to 30% higher. The same dilution sprayed on leaves in the early morning handles aphids, spider mites, and powdery mildew. No residue on food. No harm to the plant. I watched 3 of my own tomato plants come back after a week of heavy rain had left them yellow and drooping. Pour the diluted solution around the root zone 4 days in a row. By day 5, they were upright. I had written them off and was already planning to pull them. I was genuinely wrong about that. And now, the payoff I promised you in the first 60 seconds, the 1,965 USDA bulletin. The technique the bulletin called hydrogen peroxide cold immersion, and the Pennsylvania Dutch called simply rinsing. Fill a large basin ceramic, enamel, or stainless, not plastic, with cold water. Add 1/4 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide for every gallon of water. Submerge your produce completely. 5 minutes minimum, 10 minutes for produce that has been sitting out for a day or more. After soaking, drain the basin. Spread produce on clean cloths to air dry for a few minutes. Store normally refrigerator for what needs, cold counter or pantry for what does not. What you will see over the following 2 weeks produce that typically spoils in 4 to 5 days starts lasting 10 to 14. Lettuce that normally turns slimy before the weekend stays crisp for 2.5 to 3 weeks. Tomatoes hold firmness on the counter for close to a month. Cucumbers stay firm for 3 weeks instead of collapsing after 10 days. The mechanism, the peroxide kills surface mold spores and bacteria before they establish. Without those external organisms starting the decay process, the vegetable breaks down only at its own internal cellular pace, which is dramatically, measurably slower. Ruth's cellar in Lancaster County had cucumbers from September still in it in November. I checked. Firm. Not dried, not canned, not chemically preserved. Rinsed in that basin and stored in a cool room. 60 years of the same result passed from one set of hands to another without anyone's marketing budget involved. My own test with grocery store strawberries firm and clean on day 12. Strawberries I would have composted on day 5. I tested it twice before I believed the first result. Bagged salad greens that normally went slimy by day 7 crisp on day 19. In the first 3 months of consistent use, I stopped throwing out approximately $30 worth of produce every month. $360 a year. On food I had already bought and paid for. The basin you need is already in your kitchen. The 1/4 cup of peroxide costs less than 20 cents. That is not a theory. That is a ceramic basin by the back door of a farmhouse in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. That is 60 years of the same result passed from one set of hands to the next without anyone's permission and without anyone's advertising budget. The technique works because the chemistry is real, the mold spores are real, and the oxygen does not negotiate with anyone's quarterly earnings report. This formula has existed for over 100 years. Your grandmother knew it. Somewhere between 1,960 and 1,975, an industry that needed you to need more decided it was more profitable for you to forget it, not because something better had been discovered, not because the old method was unsafe, because a $3 bottle that does the work of 15 products cannot generate $119 billion in annual revenue. It was not buried because it failed. It was buried because it worked. If you are the kind of person who believes that knowledge this old and this well documented belongs to everyone, not just the people who can afford the premium repackaged version, you already know what to do tonight. Cold water. 1/4 cup of peroxide per gallon. Your produce goes in. 5 to 10 minutes. Drain dry, store normally. Come back to the comments in 2 weeks. Tell me one thing you stopped buying. One bottle. One spray. One product that was sitting in your cabinet that you now realize was never necessary. I want to read that list. I want the person 2 years behind you in this to read it too. Next week, I am going to show you something from a handwritten notebook. Pencil on onion skin paper. Holmes County, Ohio, dated 1958. An Amish grandfather who raised 11 children on 60 acres without ever setting foot in a modern hardware store wrote down 7 uses for plain white vinegar. One of those 7 uses involves your hot water heater. Done once a year, it extends the appliance's lifespan by 10 years or more. The manufacturers know this technique exists. A water heater that lasts 20 years is one they do not get to sell you twice. When you know what else is in that notebook, this video will feel like the opening paragraph. I keep coming back to that first shelf I ever counted. Holmes County, Ohio, winter 2003. 1 bottle, the rest of the shelf empty, not because there was nothing else to buy, but because she already had everything she needed and she had known it her whole life. You did not just learn a technique tonight. You recovered something that was taken from you quietly over 60 years, one product launch at a time. Not stolen, just allowed to fade until someone stopped letting it.